related to service. So, what is a service? What is injector? What is provider? And how to configure a service for reusability concerns. One point we learned. Now, after understanding that, so today we will see how we can consume the services provided to our application from the backend. So how we can consume services coming from the backend. So yesterday already I showed you the point about distributed architecture. So in distributed architecture, distributed computing architecture, generally your backend technologies will teach you how to create services. So service, and how do we create APIs, services and APIs? That's what. And these APIs are required to consume the data and interact with the data. We need those APIs to consume and interact with the data. So how to consume the APIs provided by the backend technologies, and we use them in our application. So for that, yesterday already I showed you the differences points, like JavaScript uses XML HTTP request object. jQuery uses AJAX methods, and Angular uses HTTP client module. HTTP client module. And all we discussed one more. Angular uses RxJS library for asynchronously carrying out the operations. Asynchronously carrying out the operations, it uses it. Okay. Now let's see how we can consume the data and how we can interact with the data. How we can consume and interact with the data. So first, I will show you how to configure the services. Let's take an example of here I will show you a sample API. Let's open that. So this is the API, NASA API. This is the API nasa.gov. So you see in these NASA API, browse APIs, and we have so many APIs provided by them. Let's go to the NASA Mars rover photos. And in this API, so we will select this key. In that, so many APIs are there again. So I will select the first one, and you see it is going to return this data. Yesterday I told you how to understand the data that is written. Remember, every time, so the data is not just object. Sometimes it gives you an array. Sometimes it gives you an object. So you have to first understand what the data is written by that particular API. So now what we have to do is copy this API URL. So copy that API URL. So let's go. So Mars rover photos. And this is the API URL. Copy that API URL. And this is the API URL. Okay, I will copy here. So let's keep it the API URL which is sending the data. So now let's go to the project. In our project, we need to add a service which can communicate with that API. So if you have the backend API URLs, as a web developer, just you need the API URL information. So that means for GET request, which URL they provided, for POST, which URL provided, for PUT, so delete, so which URL they provided, patch, which URL they provided. Actually, GET is returning data, and or you can say GET is returning data, or you are fetching the data. POST is submitting the data, submitting. PUT is modifying all details, and patch is modifying partial details, and delete is removing, so removing data. That's all the general API actions actually. Now, for every purpose, they will create an URL and provide you that URL. So you need to use it. So let's go now here and see. So first, in our project, we will add a service. So yesterday I showed you how to create a service. Let's go to the services folder. We are maintaining a separate folder. Let's go to the services folder and add a new file. I will give the name as NASA API dot service, NASA API dot service dot ts. This is a NASA API service dot ts file. We are adding this file. How do we configure as a service? To configure as a service, so we need to import. So from Angular core library, we need to import injectable. We have to import injectable. Now we need one more option. We have to import observable from RxJS. The observable from RxJS is responsible for executing your methods asynchronously. That means when your service is making a request with backend API and fetching the information or submitting the information, then usually it will block the other tasks performed. So without blocking any other tasks performed, we want our API to communicate with the backend and fetch that. For that, we need an asynchronous library. RxJS provides an asynchronous library for JavaScript based technologies. RxJS doesn't belong to Angular. RxJS is used in Angular. RxJS is used in every JavaScript based environment. So we need an observable. Okay, next we have to configure an injectable and provided in the root. Okay, root level. And we need to export class. So NASA API service. NASA API service. And now in this service, so we need to communicate with backend API. To communicate with backend API, we need one more library. So we have to import. So HTTP client from Angular Common HTTP. This HTTP client can communicate with can communicate with the backend APIs. Your technologies in the backend are providing APIs. This HTTP client can communicate with the API. It can communicate with that API. So here, so we are going to configure that. So HTTP client, observable, injectable. Now, HTTP client actually requires a HTTP client module. Without that module, it will not work. So make sure that the HTTP client module is imported, and it is defined in app module. Go to app module. Here we need to import HTTP client module. You have to import HTTP client module. So in the imports, we have to get that HTTP client module. So from Angular common HTTP, it is important to first import that, and then you can use this HTTP client. Now HTTP client is also a service. Then how to use a service? So first what you have to do is, we will create a constructor, and into that constructor, so we will inject that HTTP client service. That means private HTTP, it is of type HTTP client. It is of type HTTP client. Through this HTTP, you can communicate with the API. So now you need your API URL. So here, what we are doing is, so we are just configuring a property. We are configuring a property. The property is get URL. Okay. So I will just give you as a NASA API get URL. So this is a property, and it should get the data from a specific URL. This is the API URL. We will paste this URL, copy and paste the URL. This is the location from where data is coming. You need that URL. So we need the get URL. So from where the data is coming. Okay. Now we need a service method inside this service, which can return the data coming from this URL. So we will use get photos. Get photos is a method. What this get photos method will do. And one more important now. This get photos method should execute along with the other methods. It should not be synchronous. It should be asynchronous. Then we have to mark it as observable. Observable is a generic type. Observable will do two things. So it will indicate that this method will execute along with other tasks and return some data. Observable should mention about the method to execute and what type of data it returns. Observable needs the type of data to return. That means it should tell what type of data is returning. Observable is a generic type. I told you generic types are defined in the angle brace, and here it should return some any type array. Observable, it indicates it any type of array, any type of array. So you can say string type array or any type array. You can configure any type of array. So technically it is any type of array. Okay, once it is any type of array, so once it is configured with any type of array, now it should return that. So then what we have to do is, here we need to define. But remember, as per our data, it is not array. Observe carefully, our data, majority of APIs returns array or object. First you need to confirm, is it array or object? So it is object, not an array directly. So we should make it as any type object. Object is any type, so just any type. Then how it returns it? So that means by this method should return. And from where the data is coming? The data is coming from API URL. How to request the data coming from API URL? You need this HTTP client. So this dot HTTP dot, it provides a get method. This get method so gets the data. What type of data? You should tell generic type, any type of data. It should get the data from which location? This dot NASA API get URL. That means, so it is going to use a get method. So get method is for fetching the information. By using HTTP get method, so it can fetch the data coming from this URL. And the data is an object type. So get method should tell what type of data is returned. Observable also must be the same type. That means the result of this method is an object. So that means get photos is returning an object. And observe, in that object there is an array called photos. Photos is an array again. In that object you can see there is an photos array. Photos is a property. It is an array type property. So that means the object is returned by this get photos. Get photos returns an object. Okay. Now your API service is ready. That means we have the API in the backend, and we got the URL of fetching the data. We got the API URL which is returning the data, and we requested the data coming from that API URL by using HTTP client. It uses an AJAX call. So using observable, it will use an AJAX call, fetch the data from API and returns the data. So through a method called get products. So asynchronous methods are defined with observable. And to execute asynchronous methods, you need a subscriber. Subscriber is required to execute the asynchronous methods. Already this point I told you in event concept. If you remembered, I told you that event is a message sent by sender to its a subscriber to notify the change. That means observer contains actions to perform, and subscriber executes the actions. Actions are executed by subscriber. That is the general technique followed actually. So our API is ready. NASA API service, which is communicating with this NASA API, getting the data and returning it through get photos method. Now we can consume this in our components. Let's go to components and create a component, ng generate component. So Mars photos. Okay, I am creating a component called Mars photos. Okay, and let's keep this Mars photos component in the startup of our project. So Mars photos. Okay, and let's keep in index page. Mars photos. So this is fine. So Mars photos, it is working fine. Okay. Yeah. Now in the startup, you can see localhost. So that component is working fine. Now let's go to the Mars photos component, and where, so here in the TS file, here we need to inject the API service. NASA API service that we created. So we have to first import. We have to first import from. So from where dot slash. So dot slash. So we have services. From services, NASA API service. From there we have to import. So NASA API service. Okay, we have to inject that service into our component, into constructor. This dot here directly private NASA API. So NASA API, NASA API. It is of type NASA API service. Okay. Now through this we can access the API methods. And remember, so it is returning, NASA API is returning. So a object. So we need to create an object. And that object contains array. So we need to create an object. So I will give here a simple response object. It is an any type. And this response object contains photos. Photos is an array. This is how we need to keep our object ready. In this object, we need to get the data and store the data. Because we know that NASA API is sending us an object in that there is a property photos, and photos is an array type. So we have to create similar type of object here. We have to create similar type of object. And when component is initialized, we need to get the data from that API and store in this local object. So for that, what we have to do is this dot. So we have NASA API, that is API service dot. We have a method called get photos. This get photos method is an asynchronous method. Generally, asynchronous methods are executed by using subscriber. This subscriber will use a callback function. This callback function will accept every data. That means it will collect the data coming from this method. That means it will collect that object. After that, it can apply that object. To this dot response object. So this dot response object is equal to, it can apply that obj to that response object. So, but this is technically, so uses a callback function. You don't need to write like this. We use lambda expression. How we can simply use a lambda expression here? So simply we use obj. It is a response object. So that means, so this object, this get photos method returns an object. Subscribe method will execute the method and it will get the data returned object. After that, what it will do is, so it will store the data. It will store the data into this dot response object is equal to whatever the data comes, it will store there. That means now subscribe method will execute the get photos method. Get photos method is returning an object that it will collect that object and it will store that object into this response object. That means response object is our local object. That response object contains photos array. That means all the photos returned by this is stored inside that array. Now we need to just present it. That means response object contains a photos property, which is an array, which contains all the photos. And in that already I told you. So it is a collection of objects which contains ID, sol, and image src. Okay, let's design here now. So data is now stored inside this response object. We need to present it. Let's go in the HTML page. We will present the data. So that means here I will just use a div. So let's add a div. Okay, and class some container fluid. Okay, and keep a heading. So some NASA Mars rover photos. Okay, below this, I will just create a div and let me keep this as a class group, card group. Okay, and I will give here so the classes as dflex, that is display flex, flex column. I will give as flex column, and I will give this width 25. That is the width. Okay. Now inside this we need to generate a card. Div class is equal to card, and this card must be generated for every photo returned. So then we will just keep here as a card with ng for. So let item of response object dot photos, that is the array. Response object have a photos array. From there we need to pick up all the data coming in, and we need to present the data. So we are collecting that item. Item contains, now you can see the item contains photos, contains object with the ID, sol, and some image src. So I will give here. So at the top image, let's keep the image source src is equal to item dot image underscore src. That is the property. That is the property which is returning the photo, and height I will give as some 200 is the height. So height of every photo here I will define, and class I will give as card image top. Okay, and below that, so I will just put a div and class as card header, and here I will put a heading, and I want to display the item dot. So we have in the data the ID of the photo. So item dot ID, we can access that ID. So and this is photo ID. I need to keep that photo ID, and another div. So class is equal to, or simply card footer, and here we will put a paragraph, and here I will say sol. So sol, I will get that from item dot sol. I hope you people know that sols are nothing but the days on Mars, right? So the days on Mars, on which day of Mars they taken that photo, that is the sol option you have. Actually, it is having a lot of other details also. That means it is having Earth date, on which date of Earth, so it is taken. So which rover took that photo? So the Curiosity, or its landing date, its launch date. It has again objects. We need to present the content accordingly. It is having again object, we need to present it accordingly. So initially we are presenting only the basic data. So that array, okay. Now once it is ready, your presentation is ready, and you can see in the URL here, and these photos are ready. And you see the Mars rover photos, so we can get from the NASA API, and these are all the photos. Hundreds of photos are there, and these are all the photos written. How you present them, that's your wish. Means how you are going to present them. Suppose I just use it here. So the display, so the display flex column. So display flex row. So and W100 and flex wrap, flex wrap, like this. Some options we are configuring for that, and the data. So we need to present. You see, hundreds of photos are there. That's the reason side by side displaying will be a difficult task. So we will just use the flex, and we will keep in that. Yeah, hundreds are there. Better what you can do is we learned about virtual scrolling. Na? So flex column. Yeah, we learned about virtual scrolling. You can implement that virtual scrolling. So virtual scrolling means I showed you CDK, material CDK. Through that, we can add it and we can use it. It is processing that. And now we are displaying in a just simple way. So flex column, let's refresh that. Yeah, it is working on the API. It will take some time. Thank you for your all suggestions. Huh? Uh, because I know your excitement, your suggestions, you keep them with you. Huh? I know what is happening here. Okay. Because when you are dealing with such APIs, sometimes it will take a little while to return and communicate with those APIs. Huh? Okay, let's end this tab and all, and so that we can reload that. Okay, so let's request that. So localhost 4200, and these are all the images. So this is all the data coming from there. So hundreds, thousands of images are there. So better you use your lazy loading technique, so to load such images and display those images. So this is the data coming from an API and how we can consume the data and present the data. For that, we have used a simple HTTP client to communicate, fetch, and return. Every time, it cannot be in the same way. So technically, it cannot be in the same way, right? Now, what we have to do is we need to interact with such APIs in the backend and fetch the data and work with the data. This is one sample example I showed you. You can try one more. So you can go to a API fake store API. So we have a fake store API. You can try this because already if you are a web developer, technically already if you are a web developer and you are learning some backend technologies, so, you will create APIs by your own in your Java, in your .NET. You are going to create your own APIs. Now you try this one. Let's see. This is nothing but it is a sample API, free API provided by the API stores like some developers developed, and this is related to shopping. You see now in this fake store API, in the fake store API, here when I scroll down here, you can see this is a fake store API, and they provided some APIs for various requests. You see, so they provided various routes. These are HTTP methods. So get technically this is get, that is products, and get products one. So get products, so categories, that is jewelry, all these options. And these are different API URLs for fetching the details. You can test them. You can test them. For example, I click products. You see, this is the API URL. So fake store API.com. And this is products. That is products. Now, this fake store API.com products is returning some list of all the products here, and along with their images, the information. But this time, observe carefully the data returned by them. So the data returned here is this data is an array. That array contains an object. So object contains ID, and it have a title. So that is the title. So, and we have the price and the description. These are the fields they are having. And after the description, you see it is in a category called men's clothing. It is in a category called men's clothing. And image is having the photo of that. These are the details inside that object. That means first, as a developer, you need to know the URL and understand the data coming and the properties that are present in this data. So in this fake store API products, so it is returning the data, so which is an array. The array comprises of an object. In that object, we have the properties ID, so title, so we have price, yep, and we have description, and we have one more category, and we have image. These are the properties available. Now, what you have to do, we need to consume data and use this in our project. So let's do that. So a simple approach I will show you. So let's create another API service now. So how we can configure and handle the is API. See, your API related topics, your API people will teach you. I will not go into that at all and waste the time here. So you are learning from the Java full stack. I will not touch anything related to your backend, right? You have to learn everything from your backend people only. Okay. So I will not touch anything related to that, right? So technically we need to just handle in the front end. So whatever backend technologies are there, they will teach you, and those you have to consume and use here. Okay. Right. Now here we will go and we will create one more API to see what kind of data is coming and how to present that. So let's see one more time. Let's go to the services and add the service. And I already told you there is a shortcut for generating the service. What is the shortcut? ng generate service and the service name. Service name, I will define the service name as some shopping API, or say simply shop API. Shop API is the service. Okay. Skip test. So we are just using this shop API service. We are generating a service. And this API service, so that is the API service. Okay, we added that API service. And here in this API service, we are going to, so in the API service, we are going to import two options here. What are the two options we need to import? One is HTTP client. So from Angular common HTTP. Another one we have to import. So the observable from RxJS. Now we need to get the API URL here. So let's create the products get URL. Products get URL is actually the API URL. And the API URL, you have this in this website, fakestore.com/products. You can copy that URL provided by them. And I will use that here. I will copy and paste that here. This is the fake store API products. And I need to consume the data coming from there. And we know that. So we saw here the data is returning an array this time. Previously, it was returning an object. And now in this API, it is returning an array. So we will make a request here. So we will inject that HTTP client. So private HTTP it is of type HTTP client. HTTP client. And here we will create a method. Get products is a method. And what this get products method need to do? It should use an observable. So it should use an observable. So technically an observable. So it is an observable. So technically it is an observable, right? So observable is nothing but, let me, right. So it is an observable. So we need to configure this as an observable. So this observable is returning array type. So we need to configure that as any type array. We need to configure that as any type array. So we defined as any type array. So that is the any type array. And previously it was just an object. Now it is an array. Now what we have to do is, so we need to return. So return that array. So this dot, so by using this dot HTTP client using the get method. So we need to fetch the data, and it is get is returning any type array. And this is getting from this dot products get URL. So this is what actually the point how it is configured. So usually this get products is going to return the data. And this data is going to interact with the API. But remember, this is the API they provided. Although they provided so many others, you see products/1, it is going to return the specific product belongs to that particular category. So what we will do is we will create a routing technique. Through the routing technique, we will create like filter so that user can select a category. That category related products will come. That we will discuss in the next level. We will present this using some logic and routing techniques so that we can create like an shopping store. We can create like a shopping store, and we can configure like a shopping store, right? So now what we will do now, so let's go here, and we have to consume this in our components. So let's go to components now and add a component here. So let's add a component, ng generate component. The component name I will give as shop API. This is shop, just component name as shop home. Okay, shop home is the component name. Skip this. And we will keep this shop home as a startup in our project. So let's keep that shop home in the startup. So we will keep that shop home in the startup. So shop home. Yeah. So here, after configuring this shop home, and here we will go to index, and here we have a shop home. Okay, we are configuring that shop home. Okay, let's consume this now in the shop home component. So we have to inject that service first. So we are configuring private, and I will just give a data. So, and or simply say shop API, and it is of type shop home shop API service. Okay, we are injecting that service into it. Now it is returning array. So we know that we will create a products is an any type array, is an any type array. We will create an array, initialize memory for the array. Previously, we know that it is returning an object, but now we know that it is returning an array. We will configure that array. And once we defined that array and configured the array, now here we will access the method this dot on initialization, this dot shop API have get products. And to execute asynchronous methods, we need subscribe. And subscribe requires an object and data. This data so is stored inside this dot products is equal to data, because this time array is coming. So we have to collect this array. It is an array, and that array must be stored into this products array. That means products array contains all the data coming from that particular fake store, some API there. Then what we have to do is, so we need to go to the HTML page and present the data coming in. So the shopping related, whatever data is coming here. So now here we will just create a div. So let's create, so class container fluid. And here we configured the div, and class is equal to card. So, and we want this card to repeat. That means shopping. Here I will keep a heading, shopping online, something like this. Okay, and so ng for let item of collection is products. And here we will keep a div, so class card header. And we know the data coming here. So I will keep a heading 3 style. Okay. And the data coming here is, okay, this is already we have that. No? So title, we will keep that title at the top. So that means we are keeping that item dot title at the top. And that is the card header and a div, and a class as card body. In the card body, so I am displaying the image. So image source image, and some width is 200 and height 200, and image source is equal to and this image source is actually image property is there, and you can get it from item dot image property. So that is image property. And below this, so class card footer. Okay, let's put some description about that content. That means, so here I will put a paragraph, because we know that some description is also coming for that. And here I will just keep item dot description. Remember these properties case sensitive, because you have to first observe, so what is the property case, is it uppercase, lowercase, because if you mismatch them, it cannot work. So if you mismatch, it cannot work. So that is important. So now what we have to do, we have to exactly configure that, and let's save this now. And it is generating a card data coming from this API URL, and you can see these are all the data. So this is all the products data. That means the products data here, and all the products information related to different categories. It is fetching that information, and it is displaying that product data. This is the data coming from a fake store. So some API provided online, we can use that. So such APIs you will be able to create, so at the end of your web services and API services, right? So I hope you people all are dealing with currently with the API service. Web services started for you? Web services started? No. You started with your web services, you started learning about web services? No, right? Fine. So it's fine. uh, what I will do is I will give you a simple overview of how we can create the APIs in any server side technology, how we can create the APIs in any server side technology. But remember, that is your web services concept. You learn in your web services, that will be very helpful for you. Then you can create your own services using your JSP, Java, and all, and you can use them, and you can handle them here. So what we have to do is, now we will use this API, and we will try to present the data, like how we can filter, how we can display the data. Suppose now we have categories here. Categories, you see, already we learned filtering and displaying the data using categories with our own. So with our own, and if you know this, now I can create left side a filtering related any menu. Suppose you see in the left panel, suppose I created a menu. So I will create here the left side. I will create a div. So class as row, and here, so we will put a div, the class as call 3, and here a div class as call 9, and here we have that card, and here we have the option like a select, and I will keep an option here. So select category. Later we will put some details into it. So class as a form select, and here I kept a heading here. So choose a category. So actually, the intention of this presentation, you see here, this is the filtering. This is the shop store. Right side, the products are displayed here. The products are displayed related to different categories. Now what we can do is, we can select a category here. Now I need to display the list of categories coming from, and you see in this fake store API, there is a get method for product categories. If you select it, you can see that it is going to return those categories: electronics, jewelry, men's clothing, so women's clothing. And what you have to do now, you have to create another API method, so which can return these categories, so that you can display those categories. It can return those categories so that you can display those categories. So nothing special. What you have to do, so copy this URL. So now go to your API. So that is the shop API. In the shop API, we need another URL. So that is categories get URL. And this is the categories get URL. And we need another service method, get categories. Get categories, and it is using an observable. So observable, so and any type array, it is also returning an array, any type array. Now this it should return this dot http dot get, and any type of array, it should return from this dot, so categories get URL. That's it. So that means we have two methods, one method returning the products, another method returning the categories. So now let's go to our shop home component here. In that shop home component, we need another collection called categories. And in this categories, so it is an any type array again. And in this, we need to store all the categories. So we have to create, so on initialization again. So what we need to do here, this dot shop API dot get categories method is there, and subscribe, and this should get the data, and it should store in this dot categories is equal to whatever the data comes. So this is inside this method a parameter, so it can be common, it doesn't matter. For every method it can be different. Now categories contains the list of categories. So let's go to this page. I want this option to repeat. Then what we do, we create an option, and here we will write ng for, so let item of, so categories, that is the collection. And we need to display, so that item is just a category name. And here we can put a value also that item. So this is creating a drop down, and drop down this time contains all the categories you are having. Now when user selects a category, when user selects the category, so that category related products must come right side. The category related products must come right side. That means on change of this drop down, we need to collect the value, and we have to search for that inside this category, inside these products. Remember, every product is also having a category. Every product is also having a category. That category, if it is matching with the category you selected, only those products must display. And I hope you can do that by yourself now, because already I told you that logic. What do you say? Can you try that by yourself? Can you try that by yourself? Because already I showed you how to filter that. So that means when user selects the category, so the category related products must display. Just you need to apply an if inside the iterator, collecting the value from this same example I showed you with our own data. Now let's see how many of people you can do that. If you are able to do, you can submit into the classroom. Okay, so in the classroom you submit the screenshot and the code that you have done. So filtering the data, that means when user selects, only that category should come, but this time the information is coming from a API. So we have a fake store API. From there data is coming and it is accessing the data. So you try to design this by yourself now. I will upload the code up to now. What I showed you, this code I will upload into the classroom, but you need to try this additional thing. So filtering and displaying only the products that belongs to that particular category. I hope you all people can do it now, right? So can you try that, right? So yes, if you can try this, that's very good. So now in the next step, I will show you how we can handle the routing, how to create a single page application and handle routing in single page application. That we will see in the next session. Tomorrow we will discuss about that. Okay. In tomorrow's session, we will see how to create a single page application environment with a technique called routing. Tomorrow we will continue. This all code I will upload into the classroom. Okay. You try additionally this task given to you. Tomorrow we'll continue.